Welcome back to another episode of the Student Athlete Sessions by D3 Direct. Today, we're joined by a guest from out west. He is currently the Vice President for Admission and Financial Aid at Whitman in Walla Walla, Washington. But before that, he was the D3 student athlete himself out at Claremont-McKenna College, where he played baseball. He had a brief pro career out in Europe. We're going to get into that.
Okay.
But more recently, he's been working in the college admission space, so we're excited to hear his expertise there and perspective. But Adam, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Carl.
Yeah, I think we always like to just start by sharing where you are and what are you up to in this current moment.
Yeah, so I'm here in Walla Walla, Washington, southeast corner of Washington State. I'm the vice president for admission and financial aid at Whitman. I've been here at Whitman for 13 years and last 4 years or so in the VP role.
And what does that look like? Like, what is a VP of admissions getting up to on a day-to-day basis, especially
Yeah,
right
so
now during admission season?
Yeah, I mean, one of the best things about working in admission, no matter what level you're at, is that there's a real cycle to it, right? You've got a heavy recruitment season in the fall, and I'm a part of that for our team. And then you transition into reading all those applications, which is the time of year we're at right now. And then in the springtime, we've got all of those offers of admission out, and we're really working hands-on with students and families to try to help them choose Whitman if it's the best choice for them. And then we do a lot of kind of reflection and data analysis and some recruitment over the summer, and then the cycle starts again. And then in my VP role, I also sit on the cabinet of the college. So I'm involved in a lot of the broader campus-wide conversations, interacting with our board of trustees, and because I oversee the financial aid office as well, I set financial aid policy and really work to manage our financial aid budget.
Gotcha. And what is Whitman's stated policy on financial aid? Is it because I know there are a lot of schools where it's trying to meet 100% of demonstrated need? Where do you guys shake out on that front? What are your priorities?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the best things about being in my role is that we have really generous financial aid in a few different ways. So we do meet 100% of financial need for anybody that qualifies for need-based aid. And we also have pretty generous merit-based scholarships based primarily on academic achievement for students that might not qualify for need-based aid. And then, we do a few other types of scholarships as well. We have a leadership scholarship called the Garrett Sherwood Scholarship. We have a bunch of what we call talent-based scholarships for art, music, theater, debate, and even for outdoor recreation, because that's a big emphasis here at Whitman.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, always good to know. I posted this week trying to just show kids. There was a school in Indiana, Hanover College, where the difference between a 3.4 and a 3.5 was $5,000 annually. Is there a similar jump like that at Whitman where, you guys have it separated by GPA bands?
Yeah, it's a little bit like that. So I mean, to get really in the weeds here, we
Please. Yeah.
recalculate everybody's GPA just to try to keep that standardized. We do that on an unweighted scale, and then we reweight that GPA based on our internal assessment of the kind of rigor of the curriculum that the student took advantage of during their high school years. And so that's our way of trying to create kind of a GPA metric that is as, I guess we can call it, as fair or as applicable across the board as possible. So it's a little bit less maybe clear than a grid on our website that tells you that a 3.4 gets you this and a 3.5 gets you that. But it is the same basic principle. But then we do have a few things that happen also behind the scenes in the kind of more holistic evaluation that could affect the bottom line. But yeah, I mean, it is at some level, right? This reality where grades matter because the difference between like being below a cutoff or being above a cutoff could be three or four or $5,000 or more in some cases.
Right. Right. I love this look into the admissions process because I think there are a lot of kids out there who have never heard the word you just used, which is rigor. And it's something we try to talk about a lot because I know it's a very important metric in admissions offices. Um, if a kid is not familiar with that
Yeah.
and they don't have someone in their school who is helping them prep and think about this element of the admissions process, what would you advise? Take as many AP or IB classes as possible, or what would be the strategy there?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. And I think like a different way to think about rigor is just what choices are you making, right? Probably no matter what high school you attend and no matter what sort of curriculum is available to you, there are ways that you can challenge yourself more or less. And what at our best, what we're doing is just trying to assess your willingness to take on a challenge when it's appropriate for you. So kind of to your direct question, like, should you take as many AP classes as possible? I mean, I would say probably not for most students, right? Because well, for all sorts of reasons, right? There's only so many hours in a day. If you're a student athlete, you have a major time commitment, and you're probably involved in other things as well. And so it's about finding balance. The way that I like to talk about kind of academic rigor or about challenging yourself is that if you're a bright and motivated student, there's probably at least two or three subjects that you enjoy and that you're pretty good at. And it would make sense that if you're trying to grow academically, that you would seek out opportunities to learn more and to challenge yourself more in those areas. So to me, that's what appropriate rigor looks like. Obviously, it's going to vary from school to school. If you have your sights set on some of the very most selective colleges in the country, they're going to have some maybe specific guidance for what it looks like to apply to those places. But just in general, across the board, no matter what type of college you're looking at, looking for those opportunities to just, yeah, give yourself a little bit more enrichment by taking something that's going to push you a little bit beyond your comfort zone makes sense. It's the same thing that you would do to get better athletically, right? You're not going to just do what's easy every day at practice. You're going to try to push yourself to the limits a little bit. And that's what you should be doing academically as well.
Yeah, I like that analogy. Pushing your edge, continuing to improve, and having that curiosity to kind of seek what that next level is potentially. Um, on a similar note, I think a question that we get a lot from parents and kids is, they have an athletic career. Obviously, they're considering playing their sport in college, but there's a lot of concern and worry that they're not doing enough with extracurriculars. And I know kids are like, I only went to college. I graduated 2015, and I think within that, from then to now, the difference in what kids are think they have to do to be impressive to an admissions officer has drastically shot up. And they feel like they have to stuff every club in. They have to be a founder of a company by the time they're 18. Like, what do you advise an athlete to do, and what actually resonates with an admissions officer from an extracurricular perspective?
Yeah, no, again, love the question, and I feel like I could go on and on about this. But let me start with like I think a fundamental reality, right? Which is that like the way that most people think about how college admission plays out and the reality behind the scenes are very different. It is probably not the case at the vast majority of colleges that you need to be doing all of these things that sound so impressive the way that you just said them, Carl, right? Like it's just that it's not realistic. There aren't that many of those types of opportunities available. And, we expect students to be just normal high school students doing normal high school student things. And that looks different in different contexts, right? I mean, that's, for your audience, that's going to be athletics is going to be a big part of that. For other students, that might be music or theater. It might be a part-time job or home responsibilities. We do expect that students are going to be doing things that are meaningful to them outside of school, but the idea that you have to check off every box, do 1,000 hours of community service, and play a varsity sport and be leading multiple clubs, it's just not realistic for most people, and it's certainly not a standard that's going to be at play again at the vast majority of colleges. And I think that it's easy to get fixated on like a very narrow band of colleges where you hear about students not being admitted, and you can kind of construct a narrative for why that would have been because they didn't have some wow factor. But again, I don't think that's the reality for most people. But like, I guess what I would say is I'm sure that the standards for what each college looks for are going to be a little bit different. And my lens as somebody who was a student athlete and really values the life lessons that come from athletics, the ways that that actually, I think, creates synergy with academics in a lot of ways and helps people be at their best. Like I really value athletic experiences. So when I see somebody who's been a dedicated student athlete, we give that a lot of credit in our admission process. I think some colleges might want to see more breadth versus more kind of like single focus. But I think that almost any admission office is at least going to recognize that there's a high level of commitment and leadership opportunities that come through athletics. I will say one thing, which is that having talked to lots and lots of admissions folks at a lot of different colleges, we do sometimes see that student athletes who that athletics is their pure focus, their applications can come across as a little bit one-dimensional. And I think that's the one thing to kind of think about is that athletics isn't the only thing that matters to you, most likely. There's probably something else that you're excited about. And finding a way to tap into that during your high school years is probably just good advice in general, right? To diversify your level of experiences and the things that you're being exposed to. So I think it is good advice to have at least something else that you can point to. And the other advice I just tend to give when I'm talking to student athletes is that, if sports are going to be the primary thing on your extracurricular activity list, and if that's something that you're best known for at your school, chances are your recommenders are going to talk about that in their recommendation letters. It's going to come up in a lot of places. It means you might not want to have your whole essay focus on a big game or coming back from an injury in sports, right? Thinking about how do you like just show a different side of yourself so that you don't come across as one dimensional. I think that's always valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. Try to show the complete person. And
Yeah,
and as you said, it's a valuable exercise beyond just being a potential benefit to you in the process, in the admissions process, because there is some element of self-discovery. And I think when I get that question from families, the first thing I always say to the kid is, well, what do you like to do? Like, don't join the Spanish club just because you think it's going to look good. Like, do some activity and do it over the course of like a couple years because you actually want to be doing it. For one kid, it was he wanted to do research about F1 cars and about like drag of different materials. And I was like, great. Like he's like, do you think that's going to be attractive to admissions? And I was like, if you enjoy it and you've done it for a couple of years and you can talk about why it's enjoyable, that is what is going to be appealing to an admissions officer because they're going to be able to see the full version of you, as you mentioned, Adam, outside of for him, his sport was soccer, and see a more complete person.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think let's take this moment to, since we're talking about D3 athletes, you were one yourself. Let's talk about your own recruiting journey. You grew up in California, you go to school in California. How did you find your correct opportunity? How did you decide to stay in state? And did you always know you'd be a college baseball player? I think let's get to those.
Yeah, I think my story is probably not one that is all that applicable today. The D3 recruiting landscape has changed a lot since I was looking at colleges in the late 90s. Not that it wasn't happening back then, but I certainly wasn't really aware that Division III existed when I started my college search, and I certainly didn't have any contact with coaches until kind of the very end of the process. So I went to a really big public school in Orange County, California, very strong baseball program. I was a pitcher, and by the time I got to my senior year, there were four guys ahead of me in that rotation. All of them ended up pitching at D1 schools. I think I pitched maybe 12 innings my senior year. And so I kind of went into my college search thinking that, baseball was going to be a non-factor. Figured my baseball career was going to be over, and I was a fairly academically motivated person, so I had my sights set pretty high. I applied early to Stanford, like every high achieving kid in California seems to do, and now I totally understand that like that was an unrealistic thing for me to do, even with like perfect grades and having taken a lot of AP classes. It was just such a selective place, but I didn't get in early. And thankfully, I had some really good folks in my life. My parents were very supportive, and didn't put their self-worth in my college search. I also had some friends that knew that like knew me well enough to point me towards some of the schools in Southern California that they thought would be a good fit for me. Because for me, the default would have just been to go to a UC school. My sister had gone to UCLA, and it's like, oh, that'd be a great place for me to land. So anyway, Claremont-McKenna ended up on my radar as a really good academic place in Southern California. I applied there having never visited, got invited to come out to interview for a scholarship. And while I was out there, there had to be a baseball game. And I would stop by and I was watching. I'm like, huh, like, I didn't know they had a baseball team. And like good, but like again, I was coming from a very competitive program in Southern California, so I thought like, gosh, maybe I could actually play for these guys. And after the game, I talked to the coach a little bit, and he was encouraging. I met some of the guys on the team, and they seemed cool. And all of a sudden, it really changed my thinking about a school that I didn't know that much about. And then I went through this scholarship interview process and was blown away by just like the academic culture of CMC, and it felt like a great match for me. And then when I got the scholarship, which made it actually a little bit cheaper than going to UCLA would have been, kind of made the choice easy. So yeah, that was my like I guess my recruiting journey is I had a good conversation with a coach, but I had no idea that I was going to get to play for 4 years in college, and it was a really yeah, fortuitous set of events.
Yeah. It's funny you said, things were way different for you in the 90s, but I think there are still so many parallels between your experience and a lot of kids out there. And first thing is not many people know that Division III is an option to them.
Yeah.
I had a similar setup to you in high school where I was kind of the sixth, maybe fifth, sixth best player on the court playing basketball, and other teammates were getting recruited. I wasn't really sure if it was for me. Um, Also considering just going to school. And I think there is something important about two things you said, and this is very applicable for kids now, is go see a game. So see what the level looks like in person. That's a great way to do it. And then also do what you did is get as good a grades as possible so that that financial piece can be unlocked for you and you actually have choice in where you want to go. And I think that little nugget that a private school can be cheaper in net tuition, effective rate of tuition than a UC public school, is just it's very much still applicable for kids yeah,
Yeah.
currently. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you go through this 4-year career. What are those moments, now for you that still stand out, or kind of like what do you look back on and really value out of your baseball career?
Oh, I mean, I just like got goosebumps when you asked that question because like it was a really like remarkable experience for me. I mean, the friends that I have, I mean, some of my best friends today are guys that I competed with throughout college. You know, we go on ski trips, we have family events together. You know, like those guys are like my brothers, and yeah, just really, I think that's probably the biggest takeaway. But you know, I think about also these moments where like school was stressful and it was hard, and something about like walking out to RC Field, you know, the field that we played on in Claremont, on a January morning when it's, you know, 70 degrees outside and there's snow-covered mountains are in the background. And like, you know, I'm a pitcher, so we get to shag fly balls and, you know, throw a long toss and run poles. And there's just like, it just really was a grounding thing for me that kind of helped me, I think, be at my best academically, and stay focused. You know, having healthy life patterns and all that. So like those moments to me is like walking out to the field on a beautiful morning, like hanging out with guys in the dugout, and then. You know, and I think like there's also these like just moments on the field where, you know, our team either like had the highest of highs, you know, walk-off wins and, you know, amazing, unexpected, you know, moments. And some of the really like heartbreaking losses when we thought we might achieve something great and it just didn't quite come together for us. So yeah, I loved all of that about the experience, and, you know, still have dreams about, you know, pitching, but, you know, can't really do that anymore. The shoulder hasn't held up too well over the years.
Pretty standard there.
Yeah.
The body kind of falls off after college.
Yeah.
You never quite relive the highs of athletic performance as you get older. But
Yeah.
I think that, yeah, what you talked about when we were discussing admissions and how athletics can just give you so much from a life perspective. Like, I think high school is great. College is another level up. And like you talked about the shared commitment, and especially when everyone on the team is committed to like excelling in the classroom as well. It can be challenging at times, but having that group of people that you're doing it with is
Mhm.
just a really amazing experience.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then this nugget here about you played in France. How did that come about? You were a professional baseball player in France. I didn't even know there was a league there.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, we're gonna put professional in like huge quotes there. I did, you know, receive a stipend and had housing and transportation taken care of, so we're gonna count it. But yeah, so the way it came about was the guy that was our pitching coach my sophomore year at CMS, a guy named Andy Salee, had gotten, I think, hired to be the national team's pitching coach in France. And I think after my junior year, there was another guy on our team who got an opportunity to play for a team in France the summer after he graduated. So it was kind of on my radar as a possibility. And then when Andy reached out to see if anybody in my graduating class would be interested, unlike a lot of my friends who had their like fairly like high paying jobs already lined up, I was still, waiting to hear back on applications. And I thought that a good way to put off that reality would be to go play ball in France. So I said yes. I was told I was going to be playing down in southern France, and then about a week or two in advance, I found out that it was going to actually be for a team up in Normandy in a little town called Saint-Lô. I didn't speak any French, but yeah, I had a ticket and landed in Paris, and a guy from the team picked me up at the train station. And later that day, I made it to this little town about 3 hours west of Paris. And the next day we had a game, a doubleheader. So that was a whirlwind, but it was such a cool experience. And the French baseball league, it has like there's some really talented guys there, and then there are a lot of people who are very new to the game. So it was a mixed bag in terms of like level of competition, but super fun. I got to hit, which was great because I'd been a pitcher for 4 years in college, and even in high school after my sophomore year, they didn't let me hit anymore because I was so bad. So getting to go to France and like being able to hold my own in the batter's box was kind of a thrill as well. So yeah, it was a wild experience and a great way to see a new place and kind of experience a culture.
Did your French get better, or what was that like? I know you jumped right into the game, but what was the kind of cultural immersion piece of it like for you, adjusting?
Yeah. So I mean, a few things. The coach of the team, this guy named Carlos, was from the Dominican Republic. He married a French woman, where I'm still in touch with that family, and actually his son ended up playing D1 ball in the U.S., which is pretty cool.
Wow.
But yeah, Carlos was from the Dominican Republic. I had studied abroad in Ecuador when I was in college, so I spoke Spanish well enough to kind of have my relationship with my coach work well. And then all the guys on the team spoke English at some level and enjoyed doing that with me. So I didn't really have to use French for my job, right? I learned enough to be able to argue balls and strikes and do a little bit of heckling from the dugout, but I didn't really need it too much. So I picked up enough to get by with travel, being in restaurants. But I was there from May to October one year, and then ended up going back for a second season after working at an accounting firm for a little while and realizing that wasn't my path. So yeah, I ended up with 2 years in France and enough to get by, but unfortunately, didn't really develop the fluency that I might have hoped for.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's something that a lot of kids, if you ask the kids in high school, do you want to play a professional sport? Most of them would be like, yeah, I'd love to be a pro player. But I think it's fun to hear the actual realities of life abroad, which can produce amazing lifelong relationships, like your coach Carlos and his family you're still in touch with, and help his son now coming to the U.S. and playing. But then it can also be a little lonely. Like you don't speak the language, you're in a totally new place, you're away from your family, and I think it's just it's good to show both sides to people that are potentially interested in doing that. So. Um, And so yeah, you had this little stint at an accounting firm. You had 2 years in France playing pro baseball, and then I read you got your start in the admissions world as a part-time reader for your alma mater while you were working at another D3 school. What happened there? How did
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, so yeah, I got back from the second season in France and actually needed a rotator cuff surgery. So again, a third season wasn't going to be in the cards. And I went back to my alma mater, Claremont-McKenna. Had a meeting with a guy that I had gotten to know when I was an RA, the dean of students there, and I was just kind of looking for some career advice and thinking about next steps. And he was telling me that there are these things called resident directors. We didn't have those at Claremont McKenna at the time, but this idea of like you could, basically be supervising a team of RAs at another college. He's like, you enjoyed being an RA, maybe that'd be a good first step. And sometimes there's programs where you can get a master's degree while you're doing that. And so I started looking around for those types of jobs and applied for something at the University of Redlands, which is 40 minutes east of Claremont. at the table that we were at in the dining hall was the dean of admission at the time, a guy named Dick Voss, who I've, one of my mentors in the profession. And he overheard that conversation. And later that day, I got an email from Victoria Romero, who was the director of admission at Claremont-McKenna at the time, who's also a Whitman alumna, interestingly enough. And she said, "Hey, I heard that you're in a job search right now. We need some part-time readers. If you'd be interested, let me know." And so I said yes to that. And then a month later, got a job at Redlands. And so, yeah, I started reading applications for CMC, and this was still in paper. So I had to like drive out to Claremont and pick up a bin full of paper applications. And then I'd drive them out to Redlands and read them during the week. And then I'd go back and do it over again. So, yeah, it was a really cool way to kind of get a start in kind of higher education administration because I was working on the student affairs side, seeing kind of all the things that go into transitioning to college and kind of providing support to students at all with all the various experiences they have. So that's like the student affairs side. But then I'm also reading applications to a really selective school and just kind of seeing what the hopes and dreams of 17-year-olds are and kind of then seeing how those decisions get made. It was a really good kind of crash course in higher ed and kind of helped me realize that that was what I wanted to keep doing.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, a lot of questions here. When you take this tub of uh of applications, I like that like image of shuttling them back and forth. Um, I know there's a lot of talk around like how little time effectively like a kid's application is actually getting reviewed. Like I wonder from the time you started to now, how has that changed? Like,
Mm.
would you say it was more comprehensive? It currently is more comprehensive. What what is the shift looked like across your career from just the review of applications?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I do think that time spent per application has probably decreased a little. Part of that's just the proliferation of applications, right? Most
Right.
colleges have double the number of applications they used to, and not necessarily double the amount of staff. But
Yep.
part of the less time spent is just efficiency, right? Going from a paper-based system to an online system is just faster, right? You're not flipping pages, you're not getting paper cuts, all that stuff that goes along with it. It's easier to find what you're looking for in a file. It's easier to mark them up. It's easier to make notes. So I think, at least half of the time savings has come from just being more efficient in how these things are reviewed. And there's a lot of different models with how applications are reviewed these days too. Sometimes some colleges do them in teams. So I think we've all found a way to kind of handle the increased volume while still getting, I think, the meat of an application in our process. And I'm
Right.
probably speaking mostly from the context of small schools that really do a holistic process and do our best to read everything that you send in. Obviously, there are going to be like larger universities that may not be able to spend that much time on each
Yeah,
application. Yeah.
definitely. Definitely. Yeah, and just curiosity. I read there's a great book, and you're in the space. I'm sure you're aware of this, but Jeff Salingo's
Yeah.
"Who Gets In and Why" I
Yeah.
thought was a really good
Hmm.
look behind the curtain at a bunch of different schools. They had a big state school, Washington, University of Washington in your state, and then Davidson, which is actually the town I grew up in, uh,
Okay. Yeah.
and then Emory, which is a D3. So I thought it was gives you the peek behind the curtain of admissions, also paired with kind of the narrative of what a family is going through and how the applicant's trying to shape it. I
Yeah.
just thought, any family out there, that's a good read.
Absolutely.
Um, Definitely taught me a lot. But um, yeah, I think in turning more kind of to the admissions space generally, and let's get into kind of practical advice for those D3 recruits out there. Um, I think just a question that comes up a lot is how much can a coach help in admissions? What do families normally miss that a coach could help them more on, and what do they normally get wrong where a coach actually cannot help?
Yeah, no, really, really important question. And there's a few different ways I might think about this. I mean, I think as a starting point, like a coach is a really helpful way to kind of accelerate your relationship with a college. They have really good knowledge of a college. They often have good connections to faculty or students in certain academic programs. They have a direct connection to an admission office as well. So if you're thinking about visiting a college, usually a coach can help facilitate that in a way that's going to make it a really good use of your time. So I think that kind of one of the advantages of being a kind of a recruited athlete is the way that a coach can be a facilitator to growing your connection to a college. So I just start there. I think the other thing that you have as an advantage is a coach who has like I said, a direct line to the admission office, and any college that has things that they're investing in, whether it's music or theater or dance or athletics, we have an interest in making sure that those things are successful and that there are people participating in those activities. And so, like for us at Whitman, it absolutely matters that we take into account what a coach's needs are for the next year so that everybody that's involved in that sport has the best experience possible. And so, if you think about like admissions as being something where there's, in some cases, a competitive process and a lot of applicants who look good on paper academically. It's this question of what's the thing that's going to help distinguish you or push you over the top. And a coach saying that, they see you being a contributor on the mound or on the court or in the pool, absolutely can be a helpful like bonus factor there as well. So I
Right.
think that's those are two of the big things, right? Is how are you learning about a college, and then what is the kind of the thing that's going to maybe help distinguish you in a competitive process. I think it does come with some complexity, right? Because if you're trying to figure out your fit for a college, it's already complicated enough to think about an academic match, like a social and cultural match, a financial fit, right? Those things are all really important. And then you add in athletics, and it's like, well, do I vibe with this coach, right? Is this somebody I want to be like a mentor and one of the most important people in my life for the next 4 years, right?
Yeah.
And what is the culture of this team? Like, are they going to like both be good people to compete with, but also the people I want as lifelong friends, the people who are going to inspire me and help keep me motivated. So you're adding in a lot of some other variables that make it a more complicated decision. And there's this two-way street with recruitment where it's like, well, does the coach want you? Do you want that team? But also, what's the timeline for that? Because coaches need to kind of understand how to build a roster. And so there's a little bit of extra pressure, I think, that can come in as a recruit to make decisions on a timeline that's just different than what your peers might be doing at other colleges.
Yeah, 100%. I think that, yeah, that especially that last part where, the school might be the right fit, but maybe a coach has one person right above you that they're waiting to commit, and they can't give you that firm answer, even though maybe your academics and your social fit match the school. They're not able to kind of give you what you mentioned, that piece that'll push you over the edge, as like a definite yes in admissions. Um, yeah, I think that's a helpful note for athletes. And would it be a fair comparison? Because you mentioned music. This is something that has come to mind for me. It's like, think of it like, I think especially in the current landscape we are, where protected statuses and admissions are getting stripped away, and things like legacy have become much more contentious. Athletics is somewhat is one of those advantages, but it's not going to be going away because it's a priority for school, just like, someone playing the violin at a high level and being part of the school's orchestra would be, a priority for the admissions department. Is that a fair comparison?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in admissions lingo, we talk about these things as institutional priorities, right? That every college has things that, again, like I said, they're invested in, things that they're proud of, signature programs, things that really matter to them. And it makes sense that different colleges would prioritize different things, and that at some level, if you're trying to bring in 400 incoming students like we are at Whitman, you need to at least think about how those folks are going to be distributed through the programs and the resources that you have available. And some of that might happen organically and naturally. But again, if you're trying to fill like a specific instrument in an ensemble, bassoon or whatever it might be, like it is important to like keep that in mind. And you do that not just in the admission process but also in how you recruit, right? You're going to look for people that fill certain roles. And so that's I think a really yeah, apt analogy.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. Let's think, continue this process here. Uh, what is the state you're from? How does that matter in admissions, especially for a small school, like you said, trying to bring in 400 kids? You're up in Washington. Let's say a kid from Louisiana is applying. Does that matter in admissions?
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny one. I want to say that like it's really only going to matter at a very narrow band of colleges that have the privileges of thinking about like how are we going to like achieve the maximal geographic diversity possible. Like what I'd say, like at Whitman, we don't get a lot of applicants from Louisiana. When we see one, we love to see it. It's cool. We wonder about like what is their background and their context, like how might that positively impact our community. We love people to bring different regional perspectives and differences. But like how different is somebody's perspective just because they're from Louisiana versus Texas or Mississippi, right? I mean, there are
Right.
differences, but you don't want to be too you don't want to make too many assumptions about what somebody's perspective is just because of the state they happen to be coming from. And I don't know that maybe there was a time when colleges really cared about being able to say we have students from all 50 states, but that idea that like you're checking off a box, that doesn't necessarily, I can't imagine there are that many people in my role who are sitting there and saying, you know what, let's not take the qualified student from Seattle because there's this other student from Louisiana that will help us fill out the map. It just doesn't really seem like a plausible thing. It feels maybe a little bit more like some of there's a lot of mythology about college admission, and I do think that like we pay attention to geography, but it's really not a determinative factor. Certainly not in the way that like having a talent in an area that matters to the college might matter.
Right. And it's something we were talking about beforehand. As you mentioned, there's some mythology about college admissions. There's also a lot of variation in terms of school priorities.
Yeah.
And it's not an exact science. No one college wants the exact same thing in their incoming class. And there are some D3 schools who have financial aid specifically for kids coming from surrounding states, neighboring states, and they want to make that attractive to be a target. But I think, as you point out, like they're not necessarily saying, "All right, let's get coverage from the entire nation." It's more of that geographic
Right.
focus.
And there may be like regional strategies that different colleges have, right? There's a lot of demographic change happening in the United States right now, and certain regions might be growing, other ones might be shrinking in terms of the number of high school graduates. And so colleges are absolutely thinking about, what is not just our this year applicant pool going to look like, but what's that applicant pool going to look like in 5 or 10 or 15 years? And there is probably some value in building a pipeline in a region that you think is going to be important for your enrollment strategy, right? So that could also come into play in some cases that a college is just saying, what, we're going to invest heavily in Denver or in Texas or, in Southern California. Maybe that's a boost because they're going to be trying to yeah, create that pipeline. But
Right.
again, I don't
Develop
think
that.
that's less of the like you're from Louisiana, therefore you have an advantage, and more the this college has a long-term strategy.
Right. Right. Yeah. Um, Back to the elements of how a coach can help a kid. I want to talk about pre-reads because
Mhm.
this is something that I don't think many families have an awareness of. Obviously, like you said, a coach can accelerate your relationship with the college. So they can usually be the ones who, if you are the priority recruit, they'll bring it up. But how does admissions, let's keep it at Whitman, that is what you can speak on. How does the admissions department at Whitman evaluate pre-reads for athletes?
Yeah, yeah. So this concept of pre-reads or early reads, I think yeah, it's not well known, but it makes a lot of sense when you think about it, right? Coaches are trying to be that they have limited resources and limited time to spend on recruitment, and it doesn't make any sense for anybody in the process for them to spend time recruiting a student who has a low chance of actually being admitted at the end of the process. And so, as a partner with our athletics department at Whitman, starting in a student's kind of spring semester of their junior year, we tell coaches that we're happy to do kind of an initial evaluation and take a look at a student's transcript to give feedback on like, are there major concerns that we would have, or advice that we would want to convey to the student regarding what we would need to see in order for them to be admissible, right? So that might be about the grades, like a certain area where they've been struggling that we would want to see improvement. It could be about wanting to see them take that challenge in their senior year, right? We don't know what grades they're going to get as a senior, but we do see the curriculum that they choose into. And so it's our opportunity to, I think, first of all, just help point coaches in the right direction so that they can use their time efficiently, and a way to provide the same service that we would to really any student, right? I mean, you could email me today as a sophomore in high school and ask, like, hey, Adam, like, I'm really interested in Whitman. What kind of classes should I be thinking about taking as a junior and senior? And I'd be happy to answer that question. If you want to send me your transcript, I would be happy to give you a sense of like whether it looks like you're on track to be the type of student we're looking for. So we just do that a little bit more in an accelerated way with coaches because of the clear rationale for them to spend time in an effective way.
Yeah, try to make the whole process more efficient for everyone.
Yeah.
Because if the kid is going to be a no, then it allows them to go and search elsewhere and not
Yeah.
waste their time.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah, and I think for, if I'm a student or parent and I'm doing a pre-read with a coach, while of course it's not a guarantee, right? We don't have a full application, but it's really rare that we're going to tell a coach, yeah, green light, this student looks great, and then pull the rug out from under them later on. So it can be, again, it's one of those advantages to being a recruited athlete is that you get maybe a little bit more insight into the likelihood that something could work out at a college rather than having to wait until spring of your senior year. And again, it's not like I wouldn't provide that information to someone else, but we don't do like pre-reads for every single applicant because at that point, you really don't have enough time in the day. Yeah.
yes, still limited. It's a limited team, small team trying to take on a big workload.
Yeah.
So um, yeah, one more technical admissions question. Obviously, affordability is a huge issue on the topic or on the minds of a lot of Americans and families and recruits. And um, you know, when it comes to getting a financial aid offer that maybe doesn't meet what they actually can afford, um, appealing is something that I don't think a lot of families know they can do. Is that something that's an option at Whitman? And if so, what have you seen as effective ways to appeal financial aid?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's really important to know that, I mean, like an initial financial aid offer is not necessarily the end of the story. It's also important to know that it really varies from school to school. I know there are places that will say, there's no negotiation here, there's no room for appeals. You get what you get. But I think that the reality is that because financial aid is complicated, the first pass at evaluating financial aid, especially need-based financial aid, may not capture all the nuance of an individual family's circumstances. That we all have a formula that we're using. It can be different from college to college, but there's some basis in a formula, but the inputs to that formula are complicated, right? Income isn't always a linear thing or a consistent thing. Assets can fluctuate, and for families that especially have some fluctuations in their financial circumstances, there's often room for an extended conversation. And I think of that first financial aid offer as a baseline that can then be used to adjust from there. So uh, what I would say is that the question of how that's going to happen is really, it'll vary from college to college. I mean, some places have a form online that you can just submit and it says request reconsideration of financial aid. In other cases, it might be, a call to the financial aid office or a conversation with your admission officer. But almost always the request is going to be for like, what new information that we don't already have can we use to kind of take another look at your situation. And in some cases, they'll even ask to understand what the competing offers are, especially if we're talking about non-need-based aid. Colleges, are in a competitive pricing environment, and if you've realized that students are getting merit scholarship offers that are double what your college is offering, that's information that may not lead to a matching of that other offer, but it certainly is context that could, help us look at like, oh, well, gosh, like you just missed the cutoff for that next level of scholarship, and your recent grades actually would have pushed you over the top. So maybe we can go back and reevaluate that.
Right, right. And when those comparisons come in, I've read it's most effective if you are using peer institutions. So maybe like to use your situation, not to compare a UCLA offer to a Claremont-McKenna offer, but maybe a Whitman to a Claremont.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, understanding the kind of the comparative group that a college sits in is really important. And I think that in some cases, it can even like feel a little bit insulting to the college if you're saying, well, this other college is only going to cost me X amount and you cost this. And I think we would like to think that these are also very different experiences, and these colleges, have different resources available to students, and showing some awareness of why one college might cost more than another is a really, I think, important piece of the conversation, just so that everybody can be kind of having a conversation that is based in something like reality rather than in assumptions.
Yep, yep. I think that is really the goal. Try to square it as much as you can in
Yeah.
reality, and just give people clear information. So, um, yeah, getting kind of getting to the end of my question list here, but I am curious, like anything that you feel like kids are missing right now that you would love a chance to just like get more of that clear information out there on like any point of the admissions process that would be helpful.
Oh man, I could go on for so long about this. I mean, a couple categories that jump to mind, right? One is just like the hysteria that I see um, in the media and on message boards about how hard it is to get into college. Just feels very much out of alignment with the reality on the ground, which is that this is a time when, again, there's fewer high school graduates in the United States. It looks like there's going to be fewer international students coming to study in the United States. So ultimately, even if there are more applications being submitted because individual students are applying to a lot of colleges, the actual number of people going to fill spaces at colleges is going to be declining for the foreseeable future. And in that reality, it means a lot of opportunity for students, right? So it's not to say that like you're guaranteed to get in everywhere that you apply, but I do think that for everybody to take a deep breath and realize that this is actually a really great time to be applying for college, and it's not as mysterious as it seems, is a really important starting point. The
Mhm.
other thing that I do think I see a lot of is I think a misunderstanding of like what the true value of a college experience is, right? I think that like for so many students, I'm hearing this mantra of like, well, just pick the college that's best for your major. And in some cases, that can totally make sense, right? If you know for sure that you want to be an accountant, then yeah, you should probably pick a school that offers accounting classes. And Whitman doesn't really do a lot of that. So we might not be the best fit there. But it's also true that it's more likely than not that your interests are going to shift and evolve over the next 4 years. And it is true that sometimes you put pressure on yourself to not just pick a college, but also to pick a profession before you're even ready to do so. And so I think maybe zooming out a little bit from like, what am I going to be doing when I graduate from college, to instead asking the question like, what is the environment that's going to best help me kind of have a transformative experience and grow and change and be at my best, so that when I graduate from college at 21 or 22, wherever my path is led, like I've been like well taken care of. I've been surrounded by people that are inspiring to me. I have a really good, solid community that I'm a part of, and I've been challenged appropriately throughout my 4 years. When we I don't know, when we as adults, right? When we think about like where are we going to move or what house are we going to buy or whatever it might be, we're not only thinking about the bottom line cost or something like that. We're engaged in a very holistic conversation about a neighborhood and a school district and access to the things that we love to do. And so I think there's this tendency right now that I see to take the super complex college search process, which has so many variables, and in that complexity, to just try to boil it down to one simple answer: go to the place that's cheapest, or go to the
Yeah.
place that has my major, or go to the place that's closest to home. And I just think that's a shame because it's the first major life decision most students are going to make. And to
Right.
take the thing that's the best about this process, which is to open up possibility and open up options, and instead narrow yourself in prematurely, I think it's a missed opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. And I loved your answer here. I also loved your answer to another question in an interview where you talked about what ways parents can help their kids. And I think these two go together. And you say, uh, the college search is a chance to see your child with new eyes. Be curious and let them lead the process. Enjoy watching how they navigate what might be their first major decision about their future and who they're going to be. And I think that is something that does get so lost in like people want to find the school with the best outcome career wise and the highest salary. And while that might be helpful to your future, it's not going to be the sole determining factor of your happiness. And I think allowing kids to have that explore some of that flexibility and that possibility, and then also reminding parents not to like push or pigeonhole a kid towards a certain thing or a certain outcome is it's hard to do, but I think it could be really valuable in terms of overall best outcome.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in other contexts, I've talked about, that the college search can kind of serve as a bit of a coming of age experience, right? Like
Yeah.
this opportunity for a student to feel affirmed at the end of it that they're ready to like transition to a new level of independence. And so I think like there's an opportunity for parents in that to um, be a really good co-pilot to students as they're going through that, but really making sure that it's the student that's leading that journey, and that at the end of it, the student feels like, yes, like I am ready for this. I don't, like this next step of independence is one where I feel empowered rather than micromanaged.
Yep. Yeah. It's so important. It's so important. Um, yeah, I think just let's wrap it up here. Any kind of closing thoughts from your side?
I mean, I think if I think about the context of Division III athletics, I just think that like even if you like know that you want to be a recruited athlete, I think it's easy to still underestimate like how powerful that can be as a positive force over your next 4 years, right? Again, I'm just a huge proponent of doing the things that really fill you up and make you feel like you're at your best in all facets of life. And so going to college, and if you've been a competitive athlete and that competitive outlet fills you up and makes you excited, if that's the thing that gives you motivation to take care of your body, to work out, to eat well, to get sleep, holding on to those things throughout your 4 years of college will make your college experience better. I was just talking to our director of institutional research at Whitman, and I knew I was coming on this podcast. I'm like, hey, can you give me like just quick, like the most recent data on student athletes at Whitman? And they are retaining and graduating at a 96% rate, which is a little higher than our average, which hovers around 90%. And they have slightly higher GPAs. I mean, it's not a statistically significant difference, but I get a lot of concerns from families like, gosh, are they going to be able to balance athletics and academics? And I'm like, no, like they come and they're outperforming their peers. And I think part of it is the synergy that comes between doing something that you love, and really feeling like you're at your best and having a community that's supporting you in the journey. So, if you're like 9 out of 10 on wanting to be a D3 athlete, like maybe like bump that up to a 10 out of 10 because it really is a great path to go.
Yeah, and I'd echo that as well. Had a great experience. Wouldn't trade it for the world. So, before we close, the last question we asked everyone: if you could go back and have a conversation with your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give 18-year-old Adam?
I mean, I think I'd have some investment advice for 18-year-old Adam. I had a summer job, and if I put that $5,000 in the right stocks, that would have been a good move. Probably like More broadly, though, I think that I would have told that person going through the application process to think a little bit more broadly about the possibilities. Like I mentioned, I only applied to schools in California. I was pretty intent on staying close to home. I didn't really want to leave my comfort zone, except for Stanford. I guess that's Northern California. But once that got taken away from me, I did a really narrow college search, and I feel extraordinarily fortunate that I ended up in an amazing institution that I thrived at. But that felt like it took a little bit of luck for that to come together the way it did. Knowing what I know now, knowing about how many amazing D3 schools there are throughout the country, I could easily have seen myself thriving at, some of the places that I've grown to really appreciate and admire in the Midwest or in the South or in the Northeast. So yeah, a better college search, I think, would have given me more options. And even if I had ended up at Claremont-McKenna anyway, I think I would have had a better understanding of why Claremont-McKenna was the right fit for me, instead of it being really just kind of one of those lucky things where all the pieces came together. So yeah, think
Yeah,
broadly would be my biggest
I like that.
yeah, advice.
Invest that summer job money and think broadly. That's a good way to close it out.
Yeah.
Adam, I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule, especially during admission season, to join us. Um, yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, my pleasure too, Carl. It's been great. Thanks for the work that you do.
Absolutely. This has been another episode of the Student Athlete Sessions with Adam Miller, Vice President for Admission and Financial Aid at Whitman College in Washington State, former baseball player at Claremont-McKenna. If you want to check out previous episodes, you can wherever you listen to podcasts, and we will catch you on the next episode. Make sure to let us know who you want us to talk to next.